Ryan C, who's that? Somebody else coming in?
Yeah, I'm letting everyone in now.
Okay.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for part 2 of the Orange County Veterinary Assistant Schools lecture series. Tonight we have Andrew Staveley joining us to talk to us about his career and his journey to becoming an animal control officer. And so without further ado, we're going to end my little introduction and get on to the fun part of it. We're going to hand everything over to Officer Staveley, and he is going to take over and talk to you guys about his entire journey leading up to his decision to become an officer and what it takes, and just what it's like doing that. And so I present to you Andrew Staveley.
That's it. Here we go. Okay. Well, hi, everybody. So like you said, Andrew, I have this all written down. I've been practicing, so it's going to go somewhat scripted and somewhat with stories. But I have been an animal control officer now with the county for just over 14 years. I mean, a real quick backstory to get me to where I am today. When I was 17, I wanted to be a firefighter. I thought that was going to be it for me. That was the excitement I was going to have. And then also when I was 17, I went skiing one day with some buddies and I broke my back. So the firefighter thing was done and gone. So school was never my strong suit. So I packed up. I grew up in Irvine. I packed up. I moved out of state. I moved to Colorado. I got married. I started working at FedEx. I began my life and had nothing to do with animals at that point anyways. Fast forward real quick, about 8 years, I got fired from FedEx, and that was probably the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Scary. I never would have left had I just chosen to leave to start somewhere new. So I like the roots and the security, but forced to leave there. So people say that if you can do what you love, then you'll never have to work a day in your life. So at one point with FedEx, when that alarm clock went off, it was misery. It was absolutely dreadful. So I guess I was happy to leave. I just didn't know it at the time. So I bounced around for 2 years. I did jobs that I had to do to get me through the needs of life. So I drove limos for a while. I had friends that owned a Partyland store, so I blew up balloons because they could work around the hours that I needed, but certainly not anywhere I wanted to remain for very long. And then at some point, I had to get my shit together, and I need a job. I needed benefits. I needed a stronger hourly rate. I needed something that, I wasn't embarrassed to tell my friends that I was doing. So I Googled jobs with animals. That was how this all started. People ask me all the time, how'd you get your job? I Googled jobs with animals, and then I timed it and I got lucky. So Jenny had mentioned, what other jobs with animals, and I looked at everything that I could think of, and vet tech was one that popped up. And like I said, schooling was never for me. So looking into being a vet tech and what it needed with the medicine and anatomy and the science and maybe chemistry, and I didn't have the time or the money to put myself through a school like that. So that one wasn't going to go for me. I looked at zookeepers, and that would have been fantastic to go and, work in San Diego or LA, but I lived in Orange County. So it was a heck of a commute either way. That one wasn't going to work out. And zookeepers, when I was looking, they didn't make that much money. So that was definitely a labor of love. And I did not marry well, so I did not have somebody else making the money for me. I looked into the aquarium, Long Beach, and those jobs are very hard to come by. I thought that I could just go and clean the tanks and scuba dive all day, every day. And it turns out people actually volunteer to do that. They don't even pay those people to do that. So that one wasn't going to work. I looked at park rangers because I lived around Casper and O'Neill and around here. Those jobs were hard to come by. They didn't pay a specific amount, and there wasn't a terrible amount of growth in there that I wanted to do. And I didn't know how much I wanted to go around, people camping and telling them to quit drinking and whatnot like that. So I found this with the county, the animal control position, and filled out a job notification card. And they had openings, but they were never posted as to when they were going to be. So it was hit or miss. So I filled out the notification card, and then I waited and I waited and I waited. And the second that I saw the interest come up, I applied. I had everything ready to go. And then I waited some more. And it's one of the times that I was on a limo job in like industrial parts of Irvine in the skyscrapers, and I was waiting for a fare to come out, and there was a woman standing there, and she had two Greater Swiss Mountain Dogs, so two giant Mastiff-sized dogs, just standing there waiting. I went over and I started to talk to her for a few minutes, mostly just to see the dogs, and then I told her, I said, someday I want a Mastiff. I still do. Someday will happen. And she said, well, you should come and volunteer. I work at the shelter in Orange. And I said, I've actually just applied there. I applied for the animal control position. She says, oh, you did now? And she said, and we introduced ourselves. She says, my name is Jennifer. I'm the director at the shelter. I'm like, well, it is, look at that. Look at who I run into. And then it sort of turned into a job interview right there for me. So not that I was being any less polite when I was talking to her, but I said my goodbyes and she wished me good luck. And I swear, as I drove out of the parking lot, I got a phone call to come in and start my my testing process. So I'm driving away thinking this woman has some clout and some power. And a couple of years later, I went in and I asked her about it after I got the job, and she swore that she had nothing to do with it. But I'm not entirely convinced that was just a shot in the dark. So you never know who you're going to run into or where an opportunity may arise, or who knows somebody that knows somebody else that can get. It may have taken volunteering at some point, but volunteering for me was also a difficult option because I couldn't afford to just give time away for free. So I needed to make the money. I went to take the test, just a general skills knowledge test. Can you read a map? Can you answer your basic questions? And I realized then that I found out later that there were about 600 applicants for 8 positions. And yeah, they started weeding out the people from the second they give the instructions. So life lesson is follow instructions. So when they say, be here in your seat, ready to start your test at 8 a.m., doors will lock. I was sitting there at 7:50 waiting to get started. And when somebody was knocking on the door at 8:02 and 8:04, and they said, sorry, you can't come in. We locked the doors. You missed your opportunity. And I'm thinking to myself, it's like, well, I just beat that guy for the job. So I'm ahead of that guy. They said, bring your pencil, bring your calculator. So when I'm doing my multiplication that, just took a couple of seconds on the calculator, but the guy next to me says, hey man, can I borrow your calculator? And I'm like, no, because I just got your job too. So it was the second the prospective employer starts talking to you is when they're starting to look at you, I think. So I tried to get on with police agencies, and they told you show up ready for the job that you want. There were people that walked into our interview process, I found out later, in shorts and flip-flops. They just come from the beach, and I came in a suit and a tie, ready to get it started. So it was a being able to follow instructions, I think, is something that an employer wants to see from you right out of the gate. So if you're going to be a vet tech and they say, give me 5 cc's of ibuprofen, and you go and grab 5 cc's of Telazol, then you're going to get a real different result from whatever you just gave those, that amount of the drugs to. It works for me if they say, go get the dog out of cage 212, and I get the dog out of cage 222, and they're just hoping for a nail trim, but the dog in 222 is known to bite anything that moves, then I'm walking a danger into a threat of my coworkers. You can't follow instructions. It's hard to progress in life if you can't follow the basics. So I passed the general knowledge test, and then they said, great, you did fine. You go get your medical exam, make sure you can pass that. And then they said, and then you start on this day. But I never got the phone call that said what time and where I needed to be when I started. So a couple days before, I called them up and I said, hey, I don't know when and where I need to go. And they said, well, you didn't pass the physical because of my broken back. And I said, okay, well, that's a bit of a setback because I was really planning on this. This is something now I've been looking forward to for a while. And I ended up having to appeal the decision. So Jenny asked for setbacks and hard points in it. for me to get this job from the time I applied till I went through the appeal, it was about a year. So it was not something that came just willy-nilly out of the blue. But I had to go in front of a panel of 5 doctors. I had my orthopedic doctor that said I should be good to go. I've been working at FedEx for 8 years. Yes, you can carry a dog, you can pick up things. I understand the county was looking at it as though you got a bad back, you're going to work here for 6 months, and then you're going to take a leave of absence and get disability from the county for the rest of your life. That's not my style, but they didn't know that. And I've seen people do it now when they come in and they say their wrist hurts from typing on a computer. So they don't want any part of that anymore. So one of the job descriptions was being able to lift and carry a dog of up to 75 pounds for 50 yards. It's not an incredible amount of weight. It's not a very long distance. And honestly, in 14 years, I don't think that there's been a time that I've ever had to do that. And certainly not by myself. We have the tools to accommodate. We have lift gates in the trucks. We have ramps to hoist something up if it's too heavy. You have coworkers out there that are a radio call away that you can work with if you need to. I mean, for a dog, say 110-pound lab or Rottweiler that's been dead for a while, you can't get a good hold of it. You talk about dead weight, or if it's just nasty, you don't want to pick it up and put it too close to you. But I can wheel it into a sled, and then in about 3 seconds, I can have a partner come pick up the other end of the sled into the truck. So the disability factor with what they were trying to tell me for, a bad back and an injury, I wasn't about to let that one slow me down with knowing what I can do with the help or by myself. So go through a panel of 5 doctors, and I got it's a thumbs up or thumbs down. So fortunately I got the majority. And I mean, that was 15 years ago. So people ask me how I got the job, and I say, I got lucky and I timed it right. And I had a couple of fortunate incidences along the way that helped, but I had 0 experience prior to this job. I had no prior training for anything. I hadn't had any schooling. Everything was on site, and that was what works best for me. I like I said, I wasn't the best student in high school, and college lasted until I hurt myself, and then I'm out. I'm just going to go move away, get a job, buy a house, start a family, live the dream. I kind of shot to shit, but we come back and here we are today. So the on-the-job training, it was 5 or 6 months. I think they asked me in my interview, the main goal of my job is to prevent the spread of rabies. Not that that's what I spend most of my time doing on a daily basis, but that is mostly why the position exists. That's the most important. So anything that has to do with rabies, that's our highest priority, but that is not what we spend most of our time doing. So dog bites and wild animals and bats in the backyard, we spend a lot of time with those, but we do lots of other stuff too. So when they said, well, what do you know about rabies? And I kind of stared at him. I said, well, I saw Old Yeller when I was a kid. I know it didn't end well for him. And that was about the extent of it. But that's what got me into the training. And apparently it made me at least the 8th smartest person out of 500 or 600 that applied. And I'm one of, I think there are still 4 that from my training class 14 years ago that are still employed in the same place. So it's been a good fit. It's fit with my personality. It's fit with what I like to do. I could not sit at a desk job. That is a personal nightmare for me. It's a physical nightmare. I'm terrible on a computer. I just told Jenny that 2 minutes ago. I introduced my girlfriend as my tech crew. I'm not the computer guy. I learned what I had to do to be able to do the job, but it was all having somebody walk me through it. And then it's like, okay, well, now I know what to do. So somebody asked me, it's like, well, what do you do if you make a mistake? I'm like, I don't know how to fix it. So I really try not to make mistakes. So I did say I began with the county at an hourly rate at $14 an hour. And I had been at FedEx for 8 or 9 years. And when I left them, I was making over 20. So it was a bit of a pucker to think that, okay, here we go. I got bills and responsibilities and children and, cars and gas that I need to acquire. So, okay, I'll start with a 14, but there was room to grow. It was, it's after you've been there for a few years, and it just so happened that we were in the midst of an across the board county raise. So within 3 weeks, I made $3 more per hour. So yeah, in in 3 weeks of working, I made $3 less than I had been at FedEx in 10 years. So after I think 3 years, I was making more at the county than I would have at 12 years with FedEx. So I say it was terrible when it happened, but it worked out well, obviously in the long term, in the overall scheme of it. So the job also, I'm not one for conflict. I never really was, but this job is sometimes you need to. There's a time and a place. So this job has taught me the confidence. I mean, it's gotten me some of those. So um I end up going, I never would have been a lawyer. I don't like the arguing. You have a good point. I forget what my points were. It's just terrible. It was never going to work for me. I was a car salesman for about 6 weeks. That was the worst job ever. Somebody says, I don't want that. You're like, okay, sorry, carry on. And that's not what you're supposed to do. But there's a time and a place when you need to be a little more assertive than others. I do have this much law enforcement capability. So in no comparison to police, am I trying to say I'm up there, but there are leash laws. It is required that your dog have a license and a vaccination. I mean, those are the quickest ones that we can write a ticket for, probably the easiest ones to find. I see your dog off a leash, I can write the ticket. Do I? Sometimes, depends on the case. But sometimes you need to be able to walk up to somebody out of the blue and deliver them the bad news. Nobody likes to get pulled over. I just walk up to you in the park. I don't really get to pull you over. But when I have somebody will get in my face. If somebody wants to argue with me, they can, they have. It's part of the job. Nobody wants to have their dog taken away, but sometimes that situation requires that itself. But then when the police come stand behind me, I got all the confidence in the world because my friends have guns and handcuffs and they're just a guy yelling at me in the park. So I had one call years ago. This was early on, and it was in Anaheim, and a little boy was out skating around his neighborhood, and he passes by a house a couple streets over from his, and he says he sees a dog in the front yard, and he goes up to the woman standing there and he says, hey, I think that's my dog. I lost about a year ago. I live just over 2 streets over, and I think that's my dog. And she says, no, this is my dog. I found him a year ago. Okay, so the kid goes home and he gets his parents, and the parents had the adoption papers from the county, from my agency. They had the proof that that was their dog, a picture of him. They had a microchip. They called the police already. They got everybody involved. They called me and they said, we just need you to scan the dog, see if it's got a microchip, so that we can decide who the actual owner is. So in half a second, as long as it takes you to just run your scanner across the dog's back, it beeps up and it shows up the number. And I'm like, great. So it is this kid's dog. And they start arguing. I'm glad the police were there for this one, because I don't get into the middle of the civil domestic stuff. But at one point, and this was the shocker for them, so I get bilingual pay as well. I get 40 cents extra for being able to speak Spanish. And it one of my favorite parts of this job is when they don't expect that I know what they're saying, and they'll say something nasty. So this girl said something about los officers me ofendieron, and I said, hold on a second. What did you just say? And she looked at me like, oh shit. I didn't say anything. I said, did you just say that we offended you? And the police are standing behind me like, yeah, we didn't know that either. So go with it, Staveley. We'll see what we get from here. And I said, you just said that we offended you because this little boy came over here, said that that was his dog. You lied to him. You basically stole his dog. You've caused all of us to come out here and have to do this instead of being nice and giving the dog back. And we offended you. And I looked for everything that I could possibly find to write that family a ticket on their dogs, and I could not find anything. Of all the people that are finally law-abiding citizens, but it's the sense of I'm doing something right. I got the little boy his dog back, and their family dog. It wasn't just his, it was the whole family's, and what they'd been through. And as we were all leaving after they give the dog back, and the woman yells out, aren't you going to thank me for taking care of your dog for a year? I'm like, you're a terrible person. You're a terrible, terrible person. But that's neither here nor there. I got to do my part. I got to make it happen what was right and what needed to happen. So it goes to just the people that I meet, the people that I work with. Dr. Weldy's a big influence for opportunities that I've had because of this job. Yeah, right? Whoop, whoop, whoop. So most recently, I mean, my bucket list was to get a hold of a big cat. I wanted something. He works for feline breeding program, and I see pictures in his office of people playing with jaguars and tigers, and I'm like, okay, when is my day? And yeah, so it was a bucket list to get a hold of. I wanted to do the, the cat with your mouth. I'm like, well, that one wasn't going to happen. That was a little risky. But he had a couple of tigers in his office a couple of weeks ago, and I got to go, and I got hands-on. They came out of the cage. They were being trained to socialize. So it was an opportunity that how many people in the world ever get to say that they can, I of course showed pictures to anybody that would listen and look at my phone, and everybody's jealous. And that's what I was going for. I wanted
baby tigers, just so everyone knows, and they weren't full grown.
4 months old. Yeah. They wouldn't let me play with the adults. They were in a different place.
You would probably be totally game. If
Yeah. Yeah. When I asked if we could play with the big ones, they laughed and said, no, they'll kill you. I'm like,
yeah, but just so everyone else knows, they were babies.
yeah, 4 months, and yet they're still 30 pounds of kitten. You picture what a kitten can do when they weigh 1.5 pounds, and then multiply it times 30, and that's what the tiger does. But as much as I tried to get one of those tigers to come over and give me a scar so that I could have a remembrance of it, and maybe put a tattoo of a tiger scratching my leg, they didn't bite me at all. They bit everybody else and never came near me. It was, as exciting as it was a little bit of a letdown because I didn't end up with a scar, but I can work with it. So there was another time I got hands-on with a bear. It was asleep. It was tranquilized, but it was still, I can say I touched a bear. And that was because we get to work, my agency works frontline with disasters. So when there are fires or there are floods or there are mudslides, and being able to get the bear was because the Irvine Zoo was evacuated a while ago. So I've had the opportunity to do large animal rescues. So there was a couple years ago a trail of horses. So trail riding horses were out on Ortega Highway, and I think the last 2 or 3 slipped off the back of the trail and went down the side of the mountain. So we were out there with the fire department. They put the horses in the sling with the helicopters. They lifted them out there. Once the veterinarians on duty and the firefighters are there, I didn't have a whole lot of activity involved. It was above my area of expertise. However, the fire captain that was there running the whole show, his walkie-talkie battery died, and he traded with me. So had my walkie-talkie not been there, he would not have been able to communicate with anybody. So I'll take full credit for all of those rescues. There was also one of the horses in San Juan Capistrano, one of the stables, and they had like $1 million show jumping horse, and he'd gotten spooked in a rainstorm at the thunder or the lightning or something, and he jumped his pen, but he jumped it into a creek that was running by the backside of the house. So he was at least belly deep in the creek. I don't know if he'd impaled himself on the bamboo, but he was scratched up quite a bit, to the point where people couldn't get to him because the water was coming. He couldn't back up a cliff face behind him. So they had firefighters coming in with chainsaws to hack away the vegetation to get up to the horse. It's like, you can't really put a chainsaw too close to a horse without him spooking. So it's swift water, heavy duty materials and tools with a scared animal that's injured. And it's a machine to try to work to get everybody going. But it's exciting as all get out. I will pick up as one of my lieutenants called it years and years ago, you pick up the melted maggoty roadkill to be able to do the stuff with the mountain lions and the tigers and the horse rescues and the exciting stuff. So it's we've had all kinds of opportunities going on there. I've gotten a hold of baby alligators when they say that, they're in terrariums and car dealerships in Garden Grove, and people let them go in local lakes. It's, when you work graveyard shift and there's nobody else around, you get to go into the cages and you get to hold some of the animals that we've made impounds of. I've found friends that I've made doing this job because we have the same hopes and dreams and likes and whatnot. There's one of the guys that I work with that's from Belize. He's become a good friend. At some point, we will probably go to Belize. That's another one of my bucket lists. I want to go dive the blue hole there. So I've had you get like-minded individuals doing the same type of work and environment, you're bound to hit it off on some level, even if it's just professional. At least you get to work with people that hopefully have the same type of mentality and thoughts as you do. The biggest one is that when people will tell me in a story or conversation, they say, "Oh, that's so sad. Somebody should do something about it." It's like, yeah, they should. And now it's me. I'm the one that gets to do something about it. So when you got a neighbor that says, "I have video of my guy kicking the hell out of his dog because he got a puppy and it peed on the floor," you're like, okay, well then we can do something about it. Instead of just listening to the dog screaming and the guy thumping it, I will make it stop, or I will do everything I can to try to make it stop or to make it better. One of my favorite stories, again, it was Dr. Weldy. You're in a lot of these stories, Doc. That Belizean guy that I said, he had a call in, oh, I forget where it was, one of our cities, and they were backyard breeding bulldogs, English bulldogs and French bulldogs. And I don't know how much you guys know, but those are terrible dogs to breed if you are a veterinarian, much less in the backyard by yourself. And they would import the dogs from wherever it was, breed them in terrible conditions, and if they survived the birth, then they'd sell them for $3,000 to $5,000. And so one of the English bulldogs had a little tutu tank top put on her when she was very small, when she was just a puppy. And then they never took the tank top off of her. So that, you remember Lola now? Yeah. So that tank top grew into her shoulders, I guess, this part right here, and it filleted her open. So she could not stand up. She just, every time she tried to stand up, her arms just flayed. So she pretty much just laid on her chin all the time because there literally no muscle. It had been cut open. I remember the smell when he impounded her and he took her in, and when they cut the t-shirt out of her to put it in for evidence, you're like, here, judge, just smell this, and you know that the guy is guilty. But that dog lived at Dr. Weldy's office for months and months, and he fixed her and he stitched her and he sewed her up. And so she ended up disappearing one day. So I'd see her when I'd go to his office, and she was, she's doing all right. She was friendly. She came out, she was getting social and getting better. And then she's gone one day, and I'm like, oh, okay. She went to wherever she was going to go to. But then at some point, probably a year later, I was bringing my own dogs in to his office for whatever they needed. And that bulldog jumped out of the car with her owner. So it had been one of Dr. Weldy's students or the techs that he had at the time. And she jumps out of the car, and I said, "Is that Lola?" And she says, "Yeah, how do you know Lola?" And I said, "I'm one of the guys that impounded her and brought her in to here to get her better." And Lola ran into the store like she still owned the place, and she's
Yeah.
quite content just being alive at that. So those are the stories that I shoot for, the happy endings. Yes, it could have been worse, but she was one that could have been saved, and thank God she was. And I got to be a part of it. And I'm a mandated reporter. If I see children or elderly abuse going on, I get to say something about that, instead of the old somebody taking care of their mother but then just leaving her in a back room to rot until they get the inheritance or something. And we've seen some of that as well. So we get involved with social services and police and anybody else that needs to do that. So one of the things that my lieutenant said when I was in training was, there are some things worse than death. And I'm trying to wrap my head around that without ever having seen it previously. And then you see some of the things, it's like, I understand. I would rather, yeah. And as opposed to the living conditions that some of these animals have been in, I would rather think that they would want to die. Or, wings that are broken on birds that there's no fixing a compound fracture where the bone is sticking out, and people have done it thinking they're helping it. And it's like, well, you're not doing it any favors. You're elongating or you're not helping anything. You're progressing the problem and the pain and the suffering. So there's a time and a place to be a bleeding heart, and then there's a time and a place to get medical attention, whether it aid in the recovery or whether it cease the suffering. So I've had the opportunity to see quite a few funky animals, again, a lot of them from Dr. Weldy's office. But I found out I grew up in Irvine, and I had no idea that at some point there had been badgers here, and they were out on Ortega, and some of the old time officers that we had said they'd seen him out running around. They've, most of the all been hit by cars by this time, and they weren't. But even as recently as a couple of years ago, there was a rumor of one that was running around in Orange Park Acres. It's like, well, that's exciting. I didn't hear much about it. I'm sure somebody probably shot it or ran it over, and that was the end of it. But I've had, I didn't know there were weasels around here, little California brown weasels, about this big, not including the tail. And I caught one of those in a classroom in Laguna Hills somewhere. And then he escaped in my truck because he snuck out of the little wire cage that I had, and he lived in my truck for a couple of days. So I found out weasels don't eat peanut butter crackers, and they don't really care for grapes, but they like dead animals, because he tore into the roadkill that I picked up. He tore into the bags, and he certainly had a good time with the crows and the possums. The craziest one people inevitably ask me is, what's the wildest animal you've ever picked up? And it's an anaconda, and it was in a toilet, and it crawled up through the pipes. And I thought that was an urban legend, but this little old lady lived by herself. And when she called up and said, "There's a snake in my toilet," I'm like, "Nah, there's not." And there was. And he was probably 4 feet. And of all the snakes that we get boas every once in a while, the red tails that escape, and we find them somewhere, and they're fine. And the gopher snakes that are around here that are 6 feet long, they're angry, but they're not particularly going to do a whole lot of damage. The rattlesnakes are a little scary that we deal with, but this anaconda was meaner than any and all of them put together. I mean, I grabbed him out of the toilet, and he was swinging at me the second I touched him. So I screamed and I dropped. Yeah, of course I screamed. I screamed and dropped him on the floor. And then I throw him into a pillowcase, and out we go. And it's part of the job. So if you're squeamish, you got to learn to get over it. I was always okay with snakes. I'm really excited that we don't have to do anything with bugs. I don't like bugs or spiders. There's a creepy crawlies, but we don't have to go in attics. We're not supposed to climb ladders. We never go in crawl spaces. So, aside from the occasional spider here and there that I'm walking through a bush usually, and he gets in my face, I don't have to deal with him at all. So it's not that big a deal. We do have something else that I'd found, that we have ringtail cats here. And the first one I think I'd heard of was in a Kia car dealership in Irvine. And then I think Dr. Weldy had one a couple of weeks ago that he said he let back loose into the hills back in Black Star, Silverado Canyon somewhere. So we can end up with anything and everything. There was one time in Tri-City Park in Placentia, and somebody had a Coatamundi, and it was her pet, and it had been declawed. It was quite tame. It was nice, but you walk through a park and you see what they are. And I don't know if you guys all know what they are, but it's a raccoon, cat, dog, possum, squirrel, maybe 30 pounds or so. And they can be nasty. I'd seen them in Costa Rica when I went one time, and a hunter had shot one and picked it up to show, and the thing wasn't quite dead, and it reached over and tore open his femoral artery. So they can be nasty. And luckily this one wasn't that nasty, but I'm still waiting for the house that we go to that has just the exotic, illegal, everything. There's a black mamba, there's a chimpanzee in the corner, there's the, exotic bird trade that they go on. And I'm sure it's out there somewhere that people have crazy snakes. You can order just about anything online. And if you really want to, they make TV shows about it. So we had calls years ago about an albino king cobra that had escaped or something and was making its way down. I think it turned out to be a hoax, but what happens when it's not? That one time that it's not, and we go, there's a spitting cobra, and some people are crazy. One lady used to call and say, "There's a spitting cobra that's escaped in my son's bedroom," and her house was full of boxes. So this thing could have hidden anywhere. So we were going in with goggles and fire department, but she called about 4 times a day, and she'd call the police, and she'd call anybody because she was out of her mind. So she thought she had seen a spitting cobra in her house. It turns out it wasn't, but it took us a little while to figure it out. So I think the last one that I think was the weirdest one that I'd seen was and again, Dr. Weldy, it was a kinkajou, a smaller rat, squirrel, opossum type thing. And of all the animals that Jenny's dad has, gotten his hands on, the lions and tigers and bears and panthers and whatnot, said he's taken his worst bite from a kinkajou. It probably weighs about 5 pounds, if that. And so that was on the top of school. I think a security guard saw it on top of an elementary school somewhere and called us. It's like, well, I don't know how we're supposed to get that. And inevitably we did and lured in, and it ends up getting shipped out to wherever it needs to go, to a zoo or out of state where they're legal. But one of my other favorites is rattlesnakes. When we get the rattlesnake calls, we have to euthanize them on scene. So we will grab them with our pole and cinch them up close to the neck, and then we have to cut their heads off. However, I like to take it as a learning lesson when all the children are around, because I draw attention when I drive through the neighborhoods, and rattlesnakes can still bite you when their heads are off. So when I've got the little head on the end of my catch-all caught in the loop, and I'll stick my knife up in his nose and near his teeth just to get him to do the reflex so that the people can see it. Half the kids run away screaming, and half the kids just go, "Oh man, that's so cool." It's the little things that, make it more enjoyable, like I said. So I'll pick up the gross dead stuff, and in order to get to the cool stuff every once in a while, it's a fair trade. And all these life lessons and the stories and the memories and everything that I've gotten to learn. There's also the retirement to this county position, and I'm learning more and more about that. I have retirement in sight. I'm eligible in 11 years. So I started right when I was 30. I'll be 45 in a couple days. I'm eligible when I am 55, where I have 25 years of service in. It doesn't mean I'm going to retire in 11 years, because I get a percentage of my 3 highest grossing years times the number of years that I've worked there. So obviously, if I work 25 years, I get a certain amount. If I work 28 years, I get a little bit more. So it depends on how much more I want to go. That's worth it to me to continue to stay on for 25 years, still doing the same thing I've been doing. There are other positions within my agency. So if you get on and you decide, well, yeah, this is what I want to do, but I don't really want to be the hands-on animal guy, and this was my nightmare. So this is what I've avoided for 14 years. But you can be in operations, you can be in investigations, you can be in phone rooms. You're taking the calls. You're the dispatch center. You can work your way up. The lieutenants and sergeants are out in the field for the most part. The lieutenants are more desk jobs. You obviously have to work your way up to get to that, or have some experience to come into one of those. But there is opportunity. So when I said earlier that a job that I had taken and there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity to take it, I was looking to see what was going to be long term. So at one point, if I'd wanted to be a sergeant, I thought I did years ago. I'm like, yeah, they get to do cool stuff. They get to shoot the dogs with the tranquilizers and that kind of stuff. They've taken that away. So we do everything the old fashioned way with nets and poles and a bunch of people. You don't get to dart them anymore. The sergeants make a little bit more, but they have a higher level of responsibility and expectations. So it depends on how well you fit into the hierarchy, if that's what you want to go for. If you're looking for the higher positions, you move your way up to a lieutenant, and then you get to be in charge. It's not a bad gig, but you've got a lot of responsibilities. You're now guarding all the people that are out in the field and everything that goes along with them. I get the bilingual pay, like I mentioned. It's 40 cents, but that's about how good my Spanish is. It's about worth 40 cents extra. It's just enough to get me in trouble or to make somebody buy a license from me. I get a pension. Not a lot of people get the pension anymore. Those are government positions, police, fire, teachers, that kind of stuff. But when I tell people that I have a pension, that's my retirement plan, they're like, that's good. You hold on to it. They don't come around very often. And even places like FedEx, I've still got friends that work there that get the pensions because they've been there for 15 or 20 years. They said that the people that are starting now no longer get those pensions. So you're responsible for your own retirement. And a lot of people don't know that. They can't do it. They don't want to do it. So there's a lot of extra bonuses that go along with just being able to love the job that I'm doing. The long-term things. Some of the people that have retired since I've been there that I know, they say that they make more in retirement than they did going to work every day for 30 years because they're not contributing into their retirement and their medical benefits and their union dues and all of that stuff. So their checks are just what they're making 100% of their salary without putting into all the dues that they had to pay out. The shift work that I get to do, I'm on 312s right now, which is, it's absolutely fantastic. It equates to, I get 2 weeks off per month and I still work 40-hour weeks. So 1 week I work 12 hours and then the next week I work 3 12-hour days plus an 8-hour day, excuse me, to make up the difference. There was a time when we were doing 410s. That worked for me as well. The 5/8s, I'm like, I would much rather go to work a couple extra hours for 2 or 3 days and have 3 or 4 days off per week. I don't know who would want to go to work 5 days, but it's shift work. It's 24 hours a day. I'm the AM shift now, which is 6:30 a.m. to 7 o'clock at night. There's a 10:30 a.m. to 11 o'clock at night. That's the PM shift. And the graveyard goes from, I think, 7 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. or something like that. So it fits to whatever you need it to fit to. I did not like the graveyard shift. I've done it. It did not fit in with my life. Some people that have no kids, no spouse, they're single, they're like, hell yeah, I can do that. That's great. I get paid more because you're working the PM shift. It's quiet. Summers are a little bit busy, but once you get to the point where you don't want to be involved with anybody, and those calls are the ones that come in that are usually a little higher priority. So it can be really slow or it can be really busy, and you can be 5 calls deep going, because you're the only person covering the whole county for us. So you can be anywhere from Rossmore to Anaheim Hills down to Dana Point Harbor and wherever in between, with police calling you for owner arrests and whatever. There was one where I think the guy was getting arrested and there was a wolf in his back seat. So the police called and said, you need to come and get whatever that is in the back seat of that car and get it out of here because we're going to tow the car. So we had a couple of wolves come through. They usually come with a lot of hype and media and attention as well. Not that I would do anything different now, but had I started this younger or gotten into this, had I known, I've looked at other positions, like I'm quite content with what I'm doing. I can't say enough positive things about it. But I saw right when I started, we had the fires in 2007, and I got my first mountain lion call. It was back behind Irvine Lake, and Fish and Game came out. It's like, I don't think I'd ever realized that there was a Fish and Game. So looking back now, if I was 18 years old and I'm getting out of high school and I'm thinking, what do you want to do? I could look into Fish and Game. That's a specifically more strict law enforcement aspect of it. But that guy came out, you talk about loaded for bear when he opened up the back of his truck, but they go deep into the backcountry. They're looking out for poachers and people with guns and all kinds of illegalities like that. So he came out for the mountain lion. They get the big calls. So if a bear shows up in your backyard, you call the game warden. But I thought that would have been exciting, but I did not have, since I realized that was out there, I did not have the ability to go to a 6-month academy. So if that's something you want to be law enforcement, but you still want to work outside and work with animals, there's an option for that too. So there's all kinds of opportunities in an animal related field that doesn't specifically involve schooling. I think Fish and Game did want a degree, but like I said, this one was all hands on. My class of 8, there was one guy that had been a vet tech, I think one guy that had some raptor rehab experience. There was a web designer. There was a FedEx guy. So we had a mishmash of everybody coming in. And like I said, they all made it through the training. And they all made it a couple of years until they branched out. I think one girl moved back home to Iowa. One guy went to Arizona to do something else. They just faded out. Nothing that happened in particular. But the mishmash, and everybody's come in with something now. And now I look back, and I was 30 when I started. Now, we got a couple of 25-year-olds that have started on, and they're fresh out of school, and they're doing I call them hot dogs on the computer, because I can barely turn the computer on. So when they're putting together their entire reports without ever having to go out in the field, and they can contact anybody and receive their pictures and make their phone calls and get drafts drawn up of housing and yards as to where we can put fences and whatnot. They handle what they need to do. So there's opportunity if you're an inside person, if you're an outside person, if you want a little bit of both. It's been an incredible fit for me. So I don't know if that's it. That's all I had to relay onto you guys. So if you have any questions, or that's it, Jenny.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That
Yeah.
was very entertaining. And I even learned some stuff from like about your career, and just always love hearing your interesting stories. They're always so
There's
crazy.
a bunch. I wrote a book
Oh
about
my
them.
gosh, definitely. All right, so now I would love to open it up to all of our lovely attendees. If you guys have any questions, now is your time to start picking his brain. So by all means, let's go for it. So anyone who's got a question, please. And I've also got the chat box up. If you guys have any questions, that way you can relay it through chat and I can direct it that way. So please go ahead. And this is where the awkward silence happens until someone.
Science. I've been talking for half an hour.
I'll ask him something.
All
So,
right.
so anyways, as far as vet tech stuff that you're talking about and relaying here, we're trying to like show all the different avenues that vet techs can get into. I think one of the things that I wanted to reemphasize that you said was that you deal with people all day long, and that's a big part of your job. I think your animal skills and your knowledge is half your job, and the other half is people skills. And you have to get used to cranky vets like me and veterinary hospitals and walk in and be polite and stuff like that and read a situation. So I think I guess more of a statement than a question to you, but I do want to tell you that I think that it is an important part of your job as well as anybody else's job in this field to be able to do that. And I think that do you think that that should be something that people should look at strongly, because they always say, well, I want to work with animals because I don't like people, or I don't want to work with people, and that's not our job. Do you agree?
100% or 100% times 100, because like you said, there are times where I'll walk into your office a couple times a week usually, and I look forward to it at what may be in there. And there are times where I've spent an hour there. I mean, hypothetically, there are times I may have spent an hour in his office just looking around at what he's got. But then there are times where I can see how busy you are and you don't need another body in the way. And I am here for business, and I will see you next time, and I'll be on my way. So there is a huge factor of being able to like read people. You need to know when somebody may possibly be threatening, or when somebody is too busy, or when somebody's going to help you. It's like, and I'll be honest, yeah, there are times where I don't want to work with people either. I'd much rather work with animals. They do what I need them to do, and the people may not. But you got to be able to do both, at least on some level. You don't always get to just play with the kitties and the puppies and not have to work with anybody else. So there's a rounded out aspect of being able to do a little bit of a lot of things, and some need to be better than others. And you pick your strong suits, and I can see people. I can be personable, and then I can be a grumpy old man. It all depends on the day and the time and what else is going on. But when you're working, you're working. You need to get the job done. That's a big one for me. There's a time to work, there's a time to play, and sometimes they intermingle, but you need to be able to tell the difference. And you need to be able to tell the difference when you're working with other people. If they're doing the same thing, they may not want to take the time to talk with you about something right then. So do it when it's better.
I actually had a question for you. So I'm in the middle of getting my master's in veterinary forensics, and so this semester one of my classes it's called animal cruelty and interpersonal violence, and we deal a lot with this thing called the link, which is the connection of abuse and cruelty to animals and how it escalates into human violence. And one of the things they discussed was how a lot of officers have to read violence on animals and correlate that to there's going to be violence in the home. As an animal control officer, if you notice that there's violence towards an animal, or you suspect that there's violence in the home, do you have any authority to make like an arrest right away? Because you said you had some law enforcement authority, or if you notice something like that, do you have to call in the police, like the big boys, to come out and help you out?
Yes, my authority ends with your dog running around off leash in the park.
Okay.
But for something like that, that's why I mentioned a tiny bit that I'm a mandated reporter. So if I see the animal abuse, I deal with right away. I can go in and I can take your dog. Yes, I do it with the police there. I don't get to just kick your door in and, take your dog out of your arms. But if it's come to the point where it is that bad, then the police are already involved and they're there for everybody's safety. So they're the ones that if somebody wants to come at me and start a fight because I'm doing something, then the police are there hopefully to prevent that from happening.
Okay.
It's rare. I'm smart enough to talk my way out of it if I see that happening, often enough. But for something as such as like an elder abuse or a child abuse, my biggest role in that is directing it to the right person. So you get CPS involved, or you get the APS, the Adult Protective Services involved, and they will come in. It could be code enforcement if your house is a literal rat hole, and we've seen those where people are just living in filth. And I asked them the first time that I went into a house like that, and there is so much fecal matter all over the beds and the counters and the floors. And you talk about a cat house, it is. And I asked them, and I was new enough, I think I may have still been training or had just another officer with me, and I said, where do you sleep? And they literally just scraped their hand across the top of the bed and scraped all the shit onto the floor, and they're like, right here. Like, I don't know how you live like that.
Oh my goodness.
But that certainly went farther into you cannot live here. This house is no longer fit for human habitation.
Yeah.
Sometimes the water gets shut off. I've seen bathtubs that just turned into 2-foot deep litter boxes. It's like the people have started to use this is the bad side of the job, but the people have started to just use buckets in the corner. So there is no plumbing no longer. And I don't know how they get to that point before somebody like me gets involved. But at some point, yes, we start going in. Somebody says, I see a sick cat that's always sitting up on that wall and it lives in that house. Then somebody, the police, me, CPS, anybody goes over and we get a whiff of the house. That's usually an indicator too. And then we start getting everything rolling as far as, okay, we're taking everything. Like, you guys are past the point of no return to where we can just write you a note that says, hey, you need to fix this up real quick. And like, no, you passed that probably 2 years ago. Cats just living in the walls like cockroaches. They've peed away the drywall, so it's just rotted away, and you can hear them running across the inside of the ceiling, and they're all feral. You can't touch any of them. I've seen dead bodies. Like, you didn't even know that there was a dead body of that cat under this pile of papers. You're like, oh, that's where little Timmy went too. He's been gone for about 6 months. You're like, yeah, it may be time to get some help, get somebody else involved. So, like, I guess all that long-winded to answer the question, it's like, my goal is to help the animals, and then if it's people, I get to the people that can help the people that need the help.
Okay.
Just report it to somebody else.
Yeah. All right, Brian, I see you've got the little raised hand icon. What's up?
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for inviting me to the meeting. Andrew, thanks again for taking your time and coming out and speaking with us. I'm brand new to this process. I just went to OCVAS the other day and talked with Philip and Anthony. And so it's more, I guess, more of a statement. I appreciate you coming out, and kind of, it opens my eyes up a little more, because I'm learning this now from just a ground level. But maybe to think of something. Do you guys like have do you have to like regulate like pet stores, or like regular inspections or anything like that, or even breeders that breed at home?
Yes, pet stores are required to have a permit through us. They are a business, so they are running a business. So that's our business licensing department. So pet stores, if you're selling animals, I think it's anything more than fish or turtles, you have to have a permit with us. So people will say that they're a pet supply store and they can sell the fish, but if they sell anything else, then they're skating around the system. But we can go into, I mean, I don't know where you guys are, but there's a radical reptiles or exotic reptile place in Huntington Beach that has all kinds of snakes and alligators and giant tortoises. They have a permit through us because they're making money. If you're making money, we want a piece of it. I guess that's what it comes down to. Everybody wants their piece. But stables, if they're housing horses and people are paying them to house their horses, you're running a business. So if you're offering lessons or something like that, but those are also hard to get somebody to prove. So if this woman says that I have 20 horses, they're like, well, whose are they? Well, they're all mine. Well, okay, prove that they're not, and that I don't have 20 people giving me $500 a month to house all their horses here. So you're technically not running a stable, you're just the owner of a whole bunch of horses, which could be true, but a lot of people don't own, 20 horses without making money at it. That's an expensive hobby. But the circus has to go through us when the circus comes to town, and we have officers that are scheduled to work the surface to make sure that things aren't being, that things are all being done as expected and above ground, and the horses aren't hobbled in the back, and the elephants aren't. I think they've done away with elephants and whatnot from the circus nowadays, but for the last 14 years, that's what we've had to do. They do the show jumping down on in San Juan Capistrano at Antonio and Ortega, and we have our hands in that as well. So we do. I mean, we're a relatively small agency compared to all the pet stores and all the animal activities, all the petting zoos that come around at Christmas and Halloween, the pumpkin patches and the Christmas tree lots. They all have to go through us to get their permits because now they all have animals on the property as well. All these little pumpkin patches have turned into amusement parks now with any kind of thing. So we get calls for, the pig is just sitting in the sun. I'm like, yeah, he is. He's a pig. And there's a shade right there. We cannot force the pig to go into the shade, but he's okay. And a lot of times now, I've been doing this so often, we go to the same places. The second there's something wrong, like the pig scratched his ear on a loose piece of wire, that wire is fixed, it's trimmed up, that pig is removed, because you're going to get 100 people a day saying that poor pig's ear is cut, and we're just going to keep coming out and taking up the time. So people have learned, they have to fill out the forms and know what's expected of them to be able to maintain, because at any one time, if you open a pet store and that is your livelihood, I mean, this hasn't happened as far as I know, but I could walk in and shut you down. And as long as it takes me to look around and see if something is bad enough. And again, with Dr. Weldy, we've been into a pet store, that one in Lake Forest off of Aspen. Were you around for that one, where there were dead animals like in the window? You could see them through and the smell coming out, and there was a closed door. That's a big red flag. When one guy in the store says, yeah, you can look around. I'm like, okay, open this door. He says, oh yeah, you can't look in there. Why not? I don't have the key. I'm like, well, we're gonna need to see what's in there. And it was full of just dead. So shut them down right then. Impound everything. You're up for however many animal cruelty charges that we can get, and every animal is its own individual charge, and maybe several charges. So for the most part, pet stores and everything like that are regulated, and they do keep up. And if we have a problem, if somebody goes in and says, hey, I bought a sick guinea pig from that Petco, we go in, and they can't afford to have the bad press. Social media for some of these people is bad enough, but if we go in and shut them down for something like that, maybe not quite as big as a Petco or something, but the little mom and pops, they can't afford to cut corners because they can be shut down so quick. And so many people are out there looking for something to say wrong. So we do what we can to make sure that everybody stays where they need to be, I guess, if that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, it does. And thanks again for taking the time to speak with us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. Anyone else?
I'm
Mary,
sorry. I have one question.
of course.
My phone died, so I don't know what I missed. But I just wanted to know, like, what is the usual daily tasks like of your job? Like, what is, yeah, like how it goes, like most of the time, because I feel like you do a lot, but like how does it normally go on, like, again, I don't know if that makes sense.
Like a
Oh, absolutely,
typical day?
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's funny you say normally. There's no normal. So I go to work at 6:30. We have our briefings. We get the area that we're going to work for the day. You know, you get your paperwork together, and then you head out. Sometimes you start with a handful of calls that have rolled over from the day before. Sometimes you start with none. Days can be slow when it's rain. You know, people aren't out walking their dogs around, so the calls may be limited. But in the summer, when days are longer and it's warm, and babies from spring are out and about, so I pick up the roadkill. I pick up stray dogs that get out after a windy day. Those are some of our busiest days because fences have blown open. Dogs get freaked out by the sound of the wind. Dogs, well, the day after the 4th of July is actually our biggest day because dogs jump through windows to get away from the fireworks. Stray cats are a big one. Anything injured, the wild animals that we get, and that's when you realize like how many, you know, wild animals we have around there. And this goes from red-eared sliders that are in every pond that we have to raccoons, skunks, opossums. I chased a skunk out of a church a couple of days ago. That little bastard took like an hour because the whole goal, the whole point of that entire item is to not get that thing to spray. And he was in the storage room of the church, so he would have ruined all the electrical equipment and the bandstands. But I did it. I chased him out, and we got out. So it can be agency assists. We help with you know, warrants, and what's the first thing that's in a bad guy's house is a big scary pit. So the cops don't want to have to deal with it because their most probable way of dealing with it is to shoot it. I hate to say that if the dog charges at them, but they don't have the tools or the means. They went into their career because they want to deal with the bad guys. I went into my career because I want to deal with the bad dogs. So they call us to get rid of the dogs. I mean, it's a fair trade-off. You can have that stinky wackadoodle that's high on meth and we don't know what he's going to do, because after doing this for so long, I know exactly what that dog is going to do and I can prepare myself for it. So we deal with dogs, aggressive dogs, when they bite somebody. Just FYI, little word of wisdom is bats are the highest probability around here for carrying rabies. So God forbid you get a bat at an elementary school and all the kids have had a chance to poke at it and they've all been exposed. I'm filling out one bite report for every kid that's touched that bat. And good luck trying to get information on a whole bunch of kids at a school, because now I'm getting into HIPAA stuff. And so I can have a day where I'm sitting in at a park, making sure nobody runs their dog off leash. And then I can have a day where I do 2 calls because it's taken me so much time to get through everything. And there's nothing, that's not a negative or a positive in the sense of other officers not doing their job. That's just what it entails. But it could be, like I said, the melted gross stuff that you scrape up off the road, or, an anaconda in a toilet, or a mountain lion in somebody's backyard and this is a true story, I don't make this stuff up. Somebody's Sheltie, their little Sheltie had treated a mountain lion in their backyard, I think in San Juan somewhere. I'm like,
that was my physics teacher.
That's what?
That was my physics teacher.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to school at Saddleback, and this was like 5 years later, and she was like telling us a fun story, and all of a sudden she's like, yeah, my dog like 5 years ago chased a mountain lion up the tree. And I was just like, that was your dog? And she actually had a little scrapbook made of it. And I was like, I know that, officer. That's my dad. I laughed so hard. I was like, that was your dog. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's a ballsy little dog, because one little swipe, so. I just saw a quick question on the bottom and it disappeared, and I think it said, am I by myself? Yes, it is a solo operation for me, but there are other officers out in the field. So I'm running around in my truck all day, but if I have something that's too scary, let's be honest, if it's too scary, I will call the neighboring around. I'll be like, hey, I need help. Come over here and help me do this. So if there are, let's say there's, you get a call for 3 stray roaming Rottweilers running around and they're acting aggressively. I'm not going to go do that myself. That's stupid. So I will call the next neighboring route over. But for the most part, it doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't take two, but it can be a solo job for the most part until it doesn't. And then you call for an assist.
Okay.
John, I don't know who asked that. I just saw it pop up real quick and then it was gone.
Yeah, that was, I'm so sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. Neridia? Is that right? But she said, yeah, oh, good. She said,
Oh, there it is.
yeah, do you have a partner? And then Mary actually just wanted to say, thank you for speaking with us. I respect your tenacity in getting the career you have. I knew that your job is challenging, but did not realize how diverse your responsibilities are. Would never have considered a career with Orange County Animal Control before, but think differently now. So that was from Mary. And then any other questions for Officer Staveley? All right, well, I just have a fun story to share about you, and this just cracks me up because it makes me laugh every time I think about it. We had a call from dispatch at the hospital once saying that an officer was going to be coming in with a Cooper's hawk that was injured, and I was just like, all right, whatever. And this was at the old office before we moved to the nice big fancy one now. And it was me and Jamie, and we were in the back, and all of a sudden we hear kicking at the back door, and we were confused. We were just like, all right. So we open it, and you're standing there with, I think it was a bald eagle in your hands, and it was flapping around, slapping you in the face. And I was stunned. I was like, this is not a Cooper's hawk. And you said, that's what they said it was. And they were like, no. And I'm like, it cracked me up because you were like, I had to drive like this because I didn't have a box. You're like, your car was full or something like that. And I started laughing. I'm like, Tao, I need to help you. But I stood there stunned for like a minute, and I was just like, that's not a hawk, that's an eagle.
Yeah, every so often those transmissions get lost.
Yeah.
Lost in translation. You're like, that's not even close to what I said.
No, and I think that it was a baby Cooper's hawk.
That may have been me being
for those of you guys, I'm so sorry. Baby Cooper's hawks are about this big. And obviously that is not even a baby bald eagle. And this was an adult bald eagle. And I was just like, and it was trying very hard to get it. He kept smacking him in the face, and getting hit in the face by an eagle is like getting head butted by a dog. It hurts a lot.
Yeah. Gotta do what you gotta do sometimes.
But looking back at it now, it's comical, I'm sure. But at the time, I can only imagine how frustrated you were.
It probably was then too. Just give me a minute to compose myself.
All right.
Oh, speaking of sorry, one more question. I feel like there's not a lot, I feel like this is one where I feel like there wouldn't be a lot of females in the job, or because I feel like they expect us to be strong, and usually females were, not as strong as men. So how would we I'm 5 foot. I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't really fit the description for the job, or what is do you have any coworkers, I guess, that are females and how they like it?
Yes, there are probably as many females as there are males. I've been surprised on more than one occasion, and I don't mean this to sound sexist at all, but you said it first. Yes, men are bigger, usually. Men are stronger. And there are times where I can outmuscle most things. We're dealing with dogs here. It's a 60 or an 80-pound dog. I can get it to do what I need it to do. But one of the girls that I've been most impressed with, and she was our most recent hire, so I think she's been there 4 or 5 years. That was our last class when we took on, was 5 years ago. And I made the joke. I said, what do you even weigh 100 pounds? And she says, 98. I was being generous. And she became a sergeant within maybe 6 months of starting the job. So when they say that it takes maybe 2 or 3 years to get a good feel of the job and to be able to handle the situations that may come up, and that's a good rough estimate. But then 14 years down the road, and I'm still asking about, what I need to do on this call because it's just a little bit different than what I'm familiar with. But this girl became a sergeant after 6 months, and we all questioned it. We were, you know, again, to be honest, yes, we talked behind her back. We said, this is never going to last. She's just doesn't have the, but she was smart. She was smart enough to begin with. She came from a vet tech background. She was also smart enough to listen to what some of the veteran officers could tell her. She did not come in with a big head, and she learned all along the way. So I honestly, I don't, and she's not the only one. There are some, like you said, you were 5 feet. There have been a couple that were 5 feet, and we have the back of the truck. We drive Ford F-250s. So the back of the truck behind the cab has been converted into the cages. I'm sure you've probably all seen the trucks driving around at some point. The cages right behind the driver in the passenger seat are the biggest cages, and there's a door in the middle that can open up. So if we have something like a Great Dane, we can put him in and open it up, and he can go all the way across. One of these little girls, one of these short ladies, that her legs were dangling out of one of the cages because she couldn't reach the center divider to open it to put a big dog in there. So she just looked like a little body hanging out of the side of the truck, kicking her legs. I just laughed. I didn't offer to help. She'll figure it out, but they do. And there are times where I went out and I had a dog, and Mastiff, something huge that I was not able to outmuscle. I don't even think that I could catch it, this one. And I was chasing it for 20 minutes, but it was a slow speed chase. You know, he was just walking just far enough to stay away from me. And I whistle, and I have food, and I sweet talk. And then I tried to demand and snap an order. And I'm like, I need help. I can't come, or I can't catch him. He's not coming to me. They sent out a girl who is a lieutenant now, and she is maybe 5'3". And she had that dog on a leash within about 30 seconds of showing up. So it was, sometimes the animal responds better to a female. Boys are big and scary and have deep voices, and they may not attract the animals the way that a sweet talking female might. So again, sorry if that sounds sexist at all, but that is just the vocal content and volume and size and intimidation. So I like I said, I've been impressed with some of the smallest people that work there and that rarely call for help. One girl that doesn't work there anymore, she called for help one time with, and I say, an aggressive pit bull. And I'm like, oh, this must be something, because she never calls for help. And she was probably 5'2" and maybe weighed 105 pounds. I'm like, this could be bad. And I pulled up, and it was hysterical. Just started laughing. She's got her truck door open. The dog is probably 60 pounds. He's a puppy. He's rolling around on his back with his feet in the air. And I look at her, I'm like, you can't pick him up, can you? You can't get an arm around both sides of him to lift him up. She's like, no, I can't. So again, for me, it took about 3 seconds for me to scruff him, get him under the groin and the neck, and toss him into the truck. And away we go. It can be done 100 different ways. Your size doesn't matter. It can be demeanor. It can be finesse. It can be an assist from somewhere else. You use the equipment that you've got. Like I said, the ramps we have, the lift gates. Some of the trucks that we have, the big cage on the side has like a cage within a cage, and that's on a hydraulic lift. So you wouldn't have to lift anything. As long as you could get the dog on a leash or on the pole, you can then just guide him into the cage, and the hydraulics will lift it for you. So we have extension poles to reach something higher up. And there are times where a smaller person may be the only person that can get the job done. Like if you've got to fit through a chained up fence. I've had that one before where I had to crawl under a fence. Luckily, it was a few years ago. I was a different shape. In different shape. I was a different shape. There was enough space underneath the fence. So this was a long time ago. We still had the drugs to be able to tranquilize the dog and shoot him with a dart. And of course, the guy shot the dog, and he ran into an abandoned yard that was chained up and went and fell asleep in the back corner of it. It's like, well, we can't leave him there. So I think the Belizean guy that I was telling you about earlier, he's bodybuilder big. So he's not fat by any means, but his chest was not going to fit under that gate. So it's like, okay, I scurry under the gate there, get the dog back, pass it under the gate, and he can carry it the rest of the way to the truck. So your size may be beneficial for some things. I mean, it doesn't always pay to be the biggest and the strongest if that's not what the situation calls for. So don't let it discourage you by any means.
Yeah, and half of the officers I know, it's honestly, it's a good split between men and women. So it's not like this is a man's world or a woman's world. It's honestly really good mix of 50-50, I think. And even some of the higher ups, like some of the lieutenants are women as well. So it's pretty
Yeah.
good even mix.
Yeah, our director and the assistant director are both women.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. I certainly learned a lot. We're done for today. It is 8:20. So hope to see you guys next week for our next guest speaker. Thank you again, Officer Staveley, for taking time out of your evening to talk to us and tell us a little bit about your career and what got you into it. It was fascinating. And we hope you guys all enjoyed it and have a good night. So thank you very much.
Bye, guys. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.